Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us and welcome to today's webinar, which is Other Sports Are Available. So a little bit of a drift from the usual, what we do at Women in Football. My name is Yvonne Harrison. For those that haven't met me, I'm the new CEO of Women in Football and I'm delighted to be your host. We're joined, as you can see, by a fabulous panel, the majority of whom I know. We've just been having a quick chat before we came live to you. It shows just what a small sort of world the sports industry is actually. Now, they're going to be sharing some fantastic stories about their sporting careers, together with some really useful insights about the sporting industry and actually how that might relate to you as women in football. If you're joining us for the first time, a massive thank you and hello. We've had a webinar series since before, just as COVID kicked off. And actually, we've had some amazing feedback. So it's great to have you join us. If you're back for the second or more time, thank you so much for returning to us. We really do appreciate it. In terms of our webinars moving forward, we will be continuing to host these as we move out of the pandemic, and these will feature alongside our popular in-person events as well. So if you have any particular topics that you're interested in hearing more about, please do add them into the chat function when that opens and we can take a look at that for you. Now, the chat function will be activated about halfway through the webinar, and we do like it to be really interactive. So feel free to add your questions in there for our panelists. That would be really great. Introduce yourself to other people who are watching the webinar, and we can make sure we can just get a good network going on whilst the event is live as well. And finally, just so you know, the webinar is going to be recorded, which is really important to us. It'll be posted onto our YouTube channel after today. You can see this and watch it back, but you can also see all of our other webinars as well on there. So watch it at your leisure. If you miss anything or you want to revisit anything, then you can do so following on from today. Finally, before I introduce our fantastic panel, we're going to be on social media today. I think it's really important that not only we hear the fantastic insights from our panelists, but also that people who aren't able to join us today can get a sense of that on our social feeds as well. So if you do want to tweet, please tag us in at Women in Football, and the hashtag that we're using is WIF, W-I-F, webinars. So feel free to join us on that as well. Now, without further ado, I'm going to introduce our fantastic panel. I'm going to introduce one by one. I'm going to ask a few questions to each of our panelists. And like I say, then we'll come and we will look to you for questions that you might want to pose as well. So first up, I have Michelle Carney, who is founder and CEO of Purpose Driven Impact and former CEO of Special Olympics Great Britain. And Michelle's career has been super varied, spanning multiple continents and also lots of diverse roles. She's worked at director and CEO level since 2002, leading grassroots sports partnerships and organisations, which is where Michelle and I first came into contact. Michelle's worked in the commercial sector, professional sport, international development, sport for development, and also passionate about being a mentor and coach. Most recently, she spent 3 years as the CEO of the Special Olympics GB before founding Purpose Driven Impact in 2021, where she's currently leading a partnership between Sport Relief and the 2022 Commonwealth Games. And Michelle is passionate about inclusion, diversity and belonging, excuse me, and creating inclusive environments which inspire people to be the best that they can be. I hope I've done you justice there, Michelle.
I don't need to say anything now, Yvonne.
Such a varied career in sport, and you know, I'm sure we could talk for an hour on that in and of itself. Can you tell us a little bit about your journey in sport and in particular what kind of attracted you to it?
As a kid, I was passionate about sport, and there weren't the opportunities that there are now. There weren't networks that there are now. I grew up next to Man United's football ground. I was a massive football fanatic. I played football with my brothers and all the boys, and they hated me playing because I was better than them. That's what I like to say. They would like to say that I just took their ankles out. And there weren't really, I went to a secondary school that didn't believe in sport. It was I did an 11 plus and went to a girls' school, and they didn't even play hockey because it was too rough, and where I got kicked out of the headmistress's offices for daring to suggest that we should bring football into the school, she kicked me out with a very stern word to go and concentrate on my academic studies, and I would never get anywhere with sport. So I thought, oh, okay. So I faced every single barrier that there was, and and sport was my passion. Then Sir Alex Ferguson took over from Ron Atkinson, Man United. I wrote him a letter, said I really want to play girls football. Fair play to him. He wrote me back, sent me this number of this guy who was running Man United ladies team, went to play for them. We weren't very good. And then we used to train at the Cliff. And then then they moved the training, and my parents, I couldn't get there because it went off to Stockport then, and I had no access to train. So I trained for a local team. So sport was just something I was driven by, but I also then got really interested in business, and I went to a local college and did business and finance, and a tutor there said, why don't you mix the both, and you can do sport and you can do business. So that's really where I started from. And my early career did loads of volunteering in disability sport with an amazing man called Ken Black, who headed up Leeds Sports Development at the time. So that was it. And I've tried to get out of sport, and then it's just kind of brought me back, because it's a, I think, I don't know if we can hear from the rest of the panelists, but it's kind of inbuilt in you. And I've seen at every level the power that sport truly has to transform lives. So not necessarily just sport as a performance tool, but sport for how it just brings communities together and how it just removes all those barriers. So throughout my career, I'm working in Africa, running a football-based charity, using football as a tool to combat HIV/AIDS, just seeing it for myself, the difference that it makes. And I've worked in, as you said, professional sport, I've worked in professional cricket, and there are elements that I liked about that. There are elements that I didn't. And so I'm a values-led leader. So kind of worked around and kind of wanted to find my place where I felt that I could really give back, and actually that, in terms of my passion, my people, the culture that I want to work in. And yeah, so here I am, took the plunge 8 months ago.
Set up your own business in 2021, which is amazing. And it sounds like purpose-driven impact is almost, it's the culmination, like you say, of all the things that you've done before that you've really loved and the difference that you see you can make. So what drove you really, Michelle, to set up that company, and particularly when you did at a time when the world was going nuts,
It's something I've toyed with for many, many years. And I don't know if I'd never been brave enough or the circumstances hadn't been right. But, it was, I loved my job at Special Olympics. I'm really proud of the work we did there in terms of transforming the organisation. And what I felt was I had a real opportunity to, the inclusion agenda is, for me, we complicate it so much. Inclusion and diversity doesn't need to be as complex as it is. And when I was talking to a lot of businesses and corporates, I was just going, if you actually just make 3 little small changes, you just start to create that change. And I just wanted to simplify what was a really complex, overwhelming, area. And I just felt at the time that let's just see what I can do. And I'm also driven about the athletes from Special Olympics, people with an intellectual disability. 94% of people with an intellectual disability are unemployed. It's outrageous. And I want to be able to create an infrastructure for people with intellectual disability, learning disability, to be the trainers and to go into businesses. As it happened, I was contacted by the chair of Comic Relief, Eric, who said, we're kind of looking at this partnership with Commonwealth Games. We don't really have the expertise in terms of the sports field. Is it something you'd be interested in helping us with? And I went, yeah. So delighted to be doing that and looking at sport relief and how Comic Relief uses sport as a tool to do more good. And I'm also working with another charity, Made by Sport, who are put together some phenomenal statistics about the power of sport for good as opposed to sport for sport's sake. So I'm really enjoying the work that I'm doing with Sophie and the team there.
Wicked, thank you so much for sharing that, and I'm sure I'm going to come back. I've already got lots of things written down and lots more questions to ask, but I would move on to Sarah now. Thank you for now, Michelle. So Sarah's a good friend of mine. We've again known each other for a long time. She's currently the marketing and communications manager for Activity Alliance and also a trustee of Greater Sport. And I think for me, Sarah, that's where I saw your passion and your challenge shine through when I was the CEO of Greater Sport, and what a fantastic difference you made to us organisationally during my time. So Sarah's worked in marketing primarily in the sport and third sector for over 20 years and leads the Marcoms team for the national charity, where she oversees all of the online and offline activities. For those that don't know, Activity Alliance enables organisations to support disabled people to be active, and Sarah's role includes helping others to maximise their own marketing and communication potential to reach more disabled people. Like I say, the impact of that I've absolutely seen at Greater Sport. And she's so passionate, changing the marketing landscape for the better. And she uses kind of her wide-ranging understanding about the barriers that face disabled people to challenge and support organisations actually to be more effective. I think Sarah is probably one of the few disabled people as well in sports marketing specifically. And she's really devoted to increasing opportunities and strengthening our sector's diversity for underrepresented groups. So Sarah, just briefly, for people who don't know about Activity Alliance as much as perhaps I do, just tell us a little bit about what it is that you guys do and the impact that has on the lives of disabled people.
Sure. So Activity Alliance, actually, we renamed ourselves in 2018. Feels like a world away now, but we were the English Federation of Disability Sport. So people probably knew us as EFDS as well. We're the leading voice for disabled people in sport and activity. So we work with a huge number of organisations to really try and get to the brunt of the problem and actually find those solutions so that disabled people have the opportunity to be active. You know, the Paralympics is a wonderful thing, but you know what, just being active every day and having that choice is really important for a lot of people, and just getting to the gym or going to be active in the park should be an opportunity for everybody, but it's not, and disabled people still remain the least active people in society. So we have a lot of work to do. Disabled people are twice as likely to be inactive as non-disabled people. So we work with a lot of organisations from NGBs to third sector to Sport England and the bigger organisations and leaders in sport to really try and make them think differently about how they fit disabled people into their programmes.
Wicked, thank you so much. And just picking up on that, obviously your focus is around disabled people, like ours is around women in football, and that can be quite a challenge, can't it? Because when I speak to people, even previously, well, if it's gender in sport, it's just women. Like, we all look different, we'll have different kind of, so how do you get away from or support organisations in terms of that grouping of disabled people when actually there are so many other facets to individuals?
Yeah, and I think I spend my life saying I'm a woman first before I'm a wheelchair user. So I really want people to really open up the intersectionality of their thinking, because, you know, we don't all fit into one box, and that's as women as well as disabled people. So really, inclusion should embrace everything, cannot be diverse-ish. So we spend a lot of our time thinking, you know, people saying, well, where do I find these disabled people? They're not interested in our programs. And I sit there saying, we don't sit in tea rooms on a Friday. We actually are everywhere. So actually, it's really important to think inclusion from the get-go. So not think, oh, so here's our program. Where do we fit disabled people? Actually, we should be thinking about everybody and the diversity of everybody and the intersectionality of everybody when we start our programs, when we do our planning, when we do our marketing. And so my area is marketing. You know, people come to us and go, how do we make it accessible for disabled people? No, how do you make it accessible for people? So actually, disabled people will come up along with that. And actually, when you make it more accessible for blind people, you'll make it more accessible for older age range. So it's really important to think of people, not just in one box.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good point, and definitely something that resonates with my experiences working in the sports industry as well. And what would you say have been the biggest challenges you've sort of encountered from a marketing and communications point of view when you're working with external organisations that want to attract more disabled people to participate? Is it that notion that you just talked about around just think people first, or is there some kind of common things that are challenges for organisations you've met?
I think the first thing, the barrier that people often think, it comes with a big price tag. So when people think of accessibility, they go, "Oh, it's going to cost too much." Yeah. No, we can't really. Well, we can do it for people with learning disability, but not blind people, because they will need something that costs a lot more that we can't afford, or can't afford BSL. And you only have to look at what's happened in the last 2 years and the big campaign that's gone on about BSL and British Sign Language with government information, that actually, we've really got to start thinking about who we're trying to inform. And the more people we can do it to, it's much easier from the beginning to plan it into your process than it is actually as an add-on and a plaster. So I do a lot of work on websites. So people come to me and say, how do I make our website accessible? And they assume that they can just stick plasters on their website. Actually, developing websites is quite an important job from the get-go. But a lot of people think that they can just do it afterwards as an afterthought. We really want to encourage people to think about marketing from the beginning.
Wicked, thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to move on now to our next panelist. Thanks, Sarah. So Diane Medall, MBE, is CEO and co-founder of Diane Medall Sports Foundation. She's an Olympian, a Commonwealth Game gold medalist, amongst other medals that she's got there, and now also chair of the sport committee at the Commonwealth Games England, and a good friend, somebody I've known for a long time. So, Diane, I mean, you've been at 4 Olympic Games, you've won gold, silver, bronze in the Commonwealth. For those that don't know, Diane made history by holding the English, British and Commonwealth Games records all at the same time, was unbeaten by any other British athlete at her specialist distance, which is 800 metres for 6 consecutive seasons, which is pretty impressive in and of itself. But actually, where I got to know you is more recently in the work that you've done alongside your husband, Vincente, who's an Olympic coach, in really reaching young people who don't have the opportunity to participate in sport, to compete, to excel because of a whole range of reasons. And actually in 2018, you were awarded the MBE for your services to sport and to young people, which is just incredible. And I've seen firsthand the work that you do in inspiring those young people, particularly in and around Manchester. So I'm delighted to have you here with us, and I think it would be really helpful for you to maybe just share a little bit more about your career, Diane, but also about the fantastic work that the foundation is doing right now, changing lives and raising aspirations for young people.
Thank you, Yvonne. Good to be on the call. Hello, everyone. It's quite ironic for me to listen back to what you've just presented and read out there, listening to you talk about the medals and the records, because what we do now as an organisation is so far removed from that. So the Diane Medall Sports Foundation was established 12 years ago now. And when we initially set up the registered charity, it was very much around supporting young people who have got tons of potential in sport, but little opportunity to maximise that potential. And initially we went back to my school where I was identified as someone with potential. And we were able to discover 30 young people who then went on to compete regionally, some went on to compete nationally. But by year 2, so we're in 2011 now, that same school, Manchester Academy, said to myself and my team, we love what you're doing, but can you transfer those same values of focus, commitment, resilience, integrity across the whole school? Because we've got loads of kids who love sport, but they're not bothered about pulling on a GB or England vest. But we think that if we partner with you over a long term, the values that you've established within this group could really make a difference. And that's what the DMSF of today looks like. So we are very much focused on developing character and positive behaviours that enable young people, particularly those growing up in the top 20% areas across Greater Manchester, to be the best that they can be. So we talk about relationships. We try and build trust relationships. We're in 5 schools, 4 high schools, 1 primary. We're about to go into our 2nd primary school. And what we do is essentially we affect the whole school by bringing a programme, varied programmes that the school tell us they need to break down some of the barriers that young people are facing to engage with school. And I suppose our driver is very much around not necessarily dedicated to chasing medals. It's really about the commitment to provide an opportunity for a young person to, yes, achieve excellence if that's their goal, but also helping them set goals and, more importantly, mapping out a plan to help those young people achieve those goals, because that wraparound holistic support isn't easily, readily available for them.
Oh, absolutely. And it's an interesting point there in terms of almost the life skills you're supporting young people and equipping them with to be able to go on in whatever guise and reach their potential. And you know, I've witnessed some of the young people who've come through your program speak at events, blown my mind. I've learned a lot from them in terms of just having that confidence and that passion and that authenticity coming through. Just on that, Diane, in terms of your career, which has had some incredible highs, but also some very difficult times as well. What sort of skills do you think you've gained as an athlete that have been most useful to you in this next stage of your career?
I would say there's a couple of things. The first is resilience. It's a word that all of us use, isn't it? In our work, we try and impart our own personal experience and demonstrate that resilience. But for me, it is very much about never, never, never giving up. And that doesn't mean that it's easy to wake up out of bed every morning and say, yeah, today's going to be a good day. For me, it's less about motivation and more about discipline. You don't be the best you can be by being motivated every single day, because it's tough, particularly when you consider what we've all experienced over the last couple of years. I haven't always been motivated to going to work, having to tell my team that some of them are going to have to go on furlough. Some of them might have to be made redundant, for example. But not giving up on them and being disciplined enough to do the right thing in partnership with the team is something that I've always lived by. And the second is, for me, it's about team. It's about being able to overcome setbacks, difficulties by widening the team of network and support. And for me, that starts with family, really. They are my backbone, they're my foundation. And I think many of us who, have families, who have children, I think it's even more difficult, because what a lot of us have to do without that support is have an incredible timetable of planning on an industrial scale, because you can't do what you do without that team around you, without that level of support. And so the key things for me are absolutely surrounding myself and ourselves with people who believe in us and want to back us and will be there when things are not always going according to plan, but also just hanging in there and just keep going.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, we'll move on to our final panelist who's been sat there very patiently waiting for us. So this is Tammy Parler, MBA, who is the co-founder and CEO of Women's Sport Trust. Now, Tammy works with leaders from across sport, business, media to understand how to practically raise the visibility, increase the impact, and create a stronger women's sports ecosystem, which, you know, I mean, just the strength in the call alone, never mind our delegates today, is just, you know, it's really, really inspiring. And something I didn't know about Tammy, but I do now, is she's also a master in the Korean martial art of Hapkido. I think that's how you say it. Having practiced for over 40 years, and you've also set up your own school and with meditation as well. And still coach regularly. So I think that's just a really interesting dynamic. And I can imagine, you know, I set up a junior netball club, you know, Diane's got her foundation. I'm sure we're all involved in some form of grassroots sport or something that kind of keeps us really motivated as well. So I'm really interested to hear all about that as well, Tammy. But for now, just tell us a little bit more about the Women's Sports Trust, how that came about and you know, how it's evolved since when you first started it.
Oh gosh, that's quite a story, and the sort of how it came about. Women's Sport Trust is a women's sport charity in the UK, and it's all about, we have this strapline that we're about raising visibility and viability and creating unstoppability of women's sport. I suppose there's a real belief that sport should be representative of our society and every aspect of our society. And it's not at the moment. And we want the industry to actively demonstrate that it values women and girls. So what we have tended to do, we're a quirky little organisation. What we've tended to do, what we are doing at the moment is focusing on monitoring what's out there, using that data that we're collecting to influence people behind the scenes, so people, decision makers, trying to educate the industry and then support people to create a new sort of more inclusive system. So we're focusing a lot around visibility, data and stats at the moment, and we also run an athlete program called Unlocked, which is all about supercharging athlete influence as well. But the whole of the Women's Sport Trust charity actually came from I suppose that's if I'm totally honest with the answering, it came from recognizing that I didn't feel worth as a sportswoman within society. And when London 2012 came up, suddenly there were athletes around, female athletes that kind of looked like me. Suddenly there was women's sport around, and I felt different. I felt motivated, I felt valued, I felt I wasn't embarrassed about the fact that I was a martial arts coach. And it significantly affected me. And I thought, gosh, I can't lose this. And then I realized I hadn't seen it before. And once you realize, I mean, I've been so oblivious. Once you realize that something, you know, is there, so you can't unsee it anymore. I thought, well, I've got to do something. I've got to do something. I've got to be involved in sport, because I've got to stay sort of connected to this motivation and things that I was feeling, this increased self-worth. So I started writing letters. I thought, I'll volunteer. I'll do something. I'll volunteer within sport. But no one wanted me. I couldn't get.
Sorry about that now.
I couldn't get a volunteer job. So I thought, well, okay, then I can't not do something. So I know I'll set up a charity. Never done anything like this before, but I thought, well, other people have set up organisations, charities. You know, why? Well, it can't be that hard. You know, I'm not fantastically whatever gifted, but I'm not stupid. So I'll just figure it out. And Diane's point that she made about sort of never giving up, I suppose through my career, which has been a really unconventional one, that idea of it wasn't a choice not to give up. It was I didn't think I could. I didn't think there was a choice. You sort of decide something and then you keep doing it. No matter how many brick walls you start, it's not, oh gosh, there's a brick wall, I'm going to knuckle down and I'm going to continue now. It's no, well, that's the only option. So I look back sometimes and I think I wish I'd realised that I had choice at point. But then, you know, one wouldn't be where one is today without that as well. So.
Wicked. I absolutely love that story. There's so much coming through about the grit and determination of women, and it's brilliant, but also underpinned by this genuine desire and need to make a difference, actually. And I think when you speak to people across the sports industry, there's so many of us who are in it, you know, because we want to make a difference. And, you know, I guess when you look at some of the professional sports settings, people might make an assumption, and Michelle, you've worked in you know, a national governing body in terms of cricket. You know, you might make an assumption around it's all glamorous and it's this and it's that, but ultimately at the grassroots, that's where the difference gets made, because we create the aspirations and you support people in starting their journey in that sporting kind of way, and whether somebody remains at their local grassroots club or ends up, you know, on an Olympic podium, it almost doesn't matter, because the drive or the calling that's coming through so strongly from all of you is just there. I love hearing about that, and they thought, I'll just go and set up my own charity, and you've done it. And you know, I've watched some of the webinars that you do and read some of the material, and it's really powerful stuff. Really powerful in terms of what's happening now in the industry in terms of the visibility. What would you say, Tammy, has been the biggest kind of shock to you, or the biggest gains or progress that you've seen that maybe came as a surprise?
I don't think I don't look at things as being a surprise or whatever. I'm so driven by learning. I want to understand how systems work. I want to bring sort of communities together. I want to unlock potential. I suppose if I think about there being a gold thread to my career, because I was in learning development sort of previously and things, it's all about unlocking potential. So nothing's a surprise. It's just, but at the same thing, I didn't know anything. You know, you just sort of go and you want to understand what that next thing is. So sorry, I can't remember what your question was.
No, don't worry. That's absolutely fine. So, I mean, you've obviously talked about, and you touched upon there, 2012 and the personal impact that had on you, and obviously we're round the corner from a Commonwealth Games here in England now, and that's super exciting. What role do you think that those major events have got in terms of creating that impact and that legacy, Tammy?
Gosh, they're massive. You know, and having those events in the UK to bring communities together, really shine a spotlight on it. And our visibility data sort of recently has shown how important those big sort of events are in engaging audiences. I suppose the challenge that we all have, and particularly in women's sport, is about engaging beyond the big events. So how do we activate those big events so they have a knock-on? So we're creating habit of viewership, habit of spectatorship, habit of participation, whatever it is. So we don't just continue to have these sort of peaks and troughs. And I think that's where the industry is now starting to focus, particularly around women's sport, is understanding, well, at least trying to understand habit.
Brilliant. Diane, can I come to you on that point? Obviously, in your role on the sport committee for Commonwealth Games England, you know, what has the legacy focus been, and almost how early has that been brought into the planning conversation regarding the Commonwealth Games?
Yeah, it's really interesting, having just joined the Commonwealth Games board and chair the sports committee, that the conversations around legacy, I'm just joining them now. And for legacy to be successful, it has to start right at the very beginning, and not something that actually we have a conversation about when the games are happening now, or even at the end. So the conversations at Team England are around literally, how do we engage, you know, a nation around something like this that gives all the whole country visibility? So the focus is very much around participation. How do we continue to keep people involved? But it's really difficult because whilst the Commonwealth Games' remit is very much about the medal side of things, their job is to make sure that from a performance side, the athletes have got the right accommodation, the right equipment, the right facilities and venues. They are obviously involved in the legacy conversations, but ironically, that sits with the Commonwealth Games Federation to then go out and deliver. But, you know, the conversations are very genuine, they are authentic. And my experience from the 2002 Commonwealth Games, which were in Manchester, was the challenges around legacy are around really funding. So it's about upskilling coaches, having the right level of coaches, the right number of coaches to engage the right grassroots participation. And that's going to require a massive investment. And as you can imagine, my driver, which is very much about grassroots and opportunity, that's what's pushing me and challenging the board and everyone else on the board to really invest in legacy early on, right from the very beginning.
That's a really good point. And I was on a call relatively recently with a number of people and the sports minister actually around the Rugby League World Cup, the Euros that are coming in, and that was one of the key sort of themes that came out. And somebody, Zaina's referenced it in the chat actually around particularly the Euros and the legacy plan being built almost 2 years back. And you know, there's a legacy plan and committee in 8 of the host cities. They're upskilling 300 plus coaches, you know, and I think you're right. We saw it again when England won the Netball World Cup or the Commonwealth Games, and there was a real surge. But that surge, and it touches on your point, Tammy, around these spikes and how you sort of maintain. And if you've got that infrastructure at a local level, for people to go and participate and enjoy and have a good experience, then ultimately they'll hopefully retain a lot of people in the sport as well. So I think it's really interesting stuff. Each of you have talked about kind of this resilience or the grit or the drive or you know, the determination, I think, around sort of this industry and the things that you sort of worked with. What would you say to perhaps one of our attendees today, or somebody that you met at an event, a young lady who perhaps was just starting out in the industry, maybe sees it as quite overwhelming? I think there are more role models now. There are more women in sport. There are more women at higher levels within sport, but still it's not the norm to see that. What would you kind of give as a piece of advice to maybe Michelle or Sarah, if I can come to you?
Yeah, I resonate with that so much because I didn't have role models. There weren't organizations like this. I didn't see women playing football. I didn't see, you know, my learning at school was, and actually my early part of my career, I had no mentor. I didn't have people to go, actually, you're really good at this. And I really had to find my way through and make your own mistakes and then go, actually, am I good enough? You know, actually, no, their behavior, as you learn afterwards, is not okay. So the couple of things that I mean, I would say is find yourself a really good mentor. And, you know, an incredible woman, she passed, Professor Margaret Talbot was a mentor of mine for many years. And when I was looking at leaving sport, when she was the CEO of what was CCPR, now Sport and Rec Alliance, she said to me, we need people like you. You have a voice and you need to be heard. So always remember that you have a voice and it's a legitimate voice and it needs to be heard. And it stuck with me. And she gave me her time. I remember her sitting in a restaurant in London and she wrote all over this tablecloth about this long-term career. And she was really generous with her time. And I always said, why did you do this? And she said someone did it for her 7 years previously. And that was actually the great Sue Campbell. And then I used to go, how do I thank you? And she goes, pay it forward. And, you know, I just lost another dear mentor, Steve Blackie, who passed away at the weekend, and who's worked with Johnny Wilkinson and all the big top. And he has been a mentor of mine for in the last 2 decades. So just people who don't need to be in your life all the time, but that you can just check and challenge. So for me, and I've gone through, like everybody else on the panel, some really low lows and like life, you know, this is not just what I would say to anybody in a career is that your career, if it just goes up like that, you're very lucky, but I would imagine you're amongst the minority. Like I've gone from being a CEO to a barmaid to being unemployed to losing my home to then dragging myself back up again and then being a CEO again. And then, you know, so the resilience is really key. It's whatever environment you're in, just take some learning from that. Like it doesn't matter. I've been in jobs where I've hated it, but I've gone, actually, what I'm going to take from this is the learning about marketing, comms, you know, the commercial elements. So every opportunity, everything that happens in your life is an opportunity to learn from, grow from. And just because you might think that's your pathway, like just be open to different stuff as well. But I think now more than ever, there are so many networks, and I think just show up, be brave, you know, and not everybody has it together all the time. You know, we all need to just ask the questions, and just knowing that and being on, you know, a sisterhood, if you like. And my life could have been so differently if, you know, if there were same opportunities. So I just keep going. You'll find your place, you'll find your people, you'll find, you know, the environment that works for you. And most importantly, you never know who you're inspiring along the way. You never know who's listening to what you're saying at what point. And, you know, and we all have that power. So we need to use it very carefully.
Very wise words, and a lot of love coming from the chat, Michelle. I'm not going to lie. People are responding very, very well to that. But I think you're right. The power of mentors. You know, I've been very fortunate to have, and actually not just one mentor, a number of different people, because you go to people for different things. If I want to be challenged and pushed right out of my comfort zone, I know exactly who I'm going to go to. If I want, you know, a bit of a softer kind of approach. And I think in the chat as well, somebody had put a comment around, you know, just ask the question. You'd be amazed if you got in touch with somebody on LinkedIn or dropped them a message and just said, I'd really welcome, you know, as long as you don't demand their time tomorrow, people will often give up their time to share their experiences. And it's probably one of the most rewarding things I've ever done, actually, in my career, kind of the mentoring and coaching side, some of which has been formal, lots of which has not. And I can see lots of nods from panelists as well around that. One of the interesting things for me, I've had great female mentors, but I've also had some fantastic male mentors and real male allies who've, you know, when I've thought it's not possible, I can't do that, have gone, why not, Yvonne? And like just literally push me through. Has anybody got any examples of that, or any thoughts on, you know, to change the game for women's sport? You know, how can men support that? Sarah?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you looked at me, but one of my male mentors, and still is John Amici. So, and I've known him for 20 years when he was an NBA player, and now obviously he's very big in his own field. And we call each other allies. There's a lot of like talk about allies now. Mm-hmm. And, you know, I mean, as much as I'm a disabled person in sport, I look to non-disabled people to be my mentor as well. So it doesn't mean you have to be like for like. But, you know, there's cross learning. So the same as I mentor other people, I learn from my mentees as well as learning back. So it's got to be a two-way process. And I just think the more you, like you say, the more you ask people, the more they are willing to say yes and actually are waiting to be asked. And it's quite a compliment when people ask you to be a mentor. But there are lots of people out there that are amazing who work across the field of sport that we could all ask to actually just, even if it's taking an hour out of your time on a phone call, there's a lot of nice people in sport that would be willing to do that.
I think you're absolutely right. Somebody's just posted a comment here from the late Vicky Orvis, who was one of the founders of Women in Football, actually. Just on that point, there is a special place in hell for women who don't support other women. So as well, just bear in mind, you know, and it goes back to, we were having a brief conversation before we came live today around the industry being such a small place. And actually, the need to treat people, it's that age-old thing, isn't it? Treat people like you want to be treated yourself. But honestly, do that, because it's so important. And, you know, I've had fantastic people around me, but I've also had friends who've maybe not had the support of fellow females within the industry because they've made it, and it's kind of like you're almost a threat. And I think the best approach is, you know, surround yourself with people who are better than you, because it just pushes you. And you know, I can see, you know, there's lots of similar thoughts in from the panel, from the body language, which is massively important. People often talk about the challenges that women face, and we could spend an entire day discussing the challenges that women face in the sports industry. I want to kind of flip it around a little bit, and maybe Tammy, Diane, come to you. What are the benefits of being a woman in this industry, do you think?
Wow, that's deep. What are the benefits? We
are on Tuesday, aren't we? I mean, it's allowed.
I was all ready to talk about some of the challenges.
I know.
I think the benefits of being a woman in this industry actually are no different to being a male in this industry. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I'm a woman. I can't do anything about that, and I wouldn't want to. So my approach is, how do I continue to add value to me? How do I continue to be the best leader, the best friend, the best individual, the best teammate that I can be? And so, you know, I will seek help, support, advice from anyone who I feel can help me grow. And it's interesting, you know, just listening to what Michelle was saying there, two of the mentors that I still live by and pick up the phone to are two very strong women who even to this day support me. One is absolutely Sue Campbell, an amazing leader, generous, kind, all those things that we talk about, but also Jane Ashworth, who was the CEO of Street Games up until most recently. And in many ways, I learned so much from those two females, from those two women, because they were so driven in terms of their own vision. No one was going to stop them. They didn't say many words, but what they did say was very direct, very focused, very supportive, didn't give you any of the answers. They forced me to think about, what is it that I want to do? And I don't know whether that answers the question or not, but I'm dealing with the cards that I've dealt, and it's an immense privilege to do what I do, and you know, regardless of the gender.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an incredible industry to work in, isn't it? The sports industry. And you know, when you sometimes speak to some of your friends who get up in the morning, and don't get me wrong, I'm not particularly a morning person, but I kind of love what I do, and I always have been able to say that, whereas some people, they don't. So it is a real privilege. Tammy, can I come to you? I'm interested. We've talked a lot on the call, and you talked about, I'm not going to give up, I'm going to get this charity off the ground, and I'm going to do my thing. What has been your best failure? Like the thing that you have really kind of tripped over but learned the most from? Because I think we can often be in these conversations and we can talk about how fantastic this has been and that's been, but actually we all have those beep moments where you know, we've really dropped the ball, but we learn so much from it. Can you
oh my god, there hasn't been just one. I mean, there's it's constant when you've never done something before, and you go, I thought you were going to ask me the previous question, and if I could just sort of come in on that one as well, and to say, as women in the industry, we have massive potential and massive to future-proof the industry. Our industry is too white and it's too male, and therefore it sees things in a very narrow way. And as women, if more women in the industry will start to enable the industry to grow, to access opportunities, to access different commercial strands and all sorts. So I think it's absolutely essential that we step up and that we force our way in to, if need be, to this. But as far as things I've messed up, oh my God, the webinar isn't long enough. I mean, you set up a charity. I failed at that twice before I was able to get charity status, all the way through sort of, not totally clear about what you're doing as far as an organization, then oh gosh, but the thing is, if you keep trying and you keep asking for help, and that whole point around support networks is just absolutely essential. And we see that with the athlete programs that we do as well. The key thing, we run all sorts of different webinars like these and engagements and pair them up and all that sort of thing. But what people seem to get most from is connecting those support networks and just being able to talk about their own experiences. So I suppose I'm realizing one thing that my biggest mistake is I probably didn't talk enough about my own experiences at points, but I'm getting better.
Wonderful. And sorry, I did put you on the spot with that one. Has anybody else got any kind of like the thing that they did that they took so much learning from? Because I do think there's a mindset thing of people fearing failure and thinking it's a bad thing, but actually if you can flip it around and sort of take from it the learning, then it's massive opportunity for growth, isn't it?
I would just say all the jobs that I went for interviews for that I should have got, I was more than qualified for, and that I didn't get. And, you just are distraught, and, it has other consequences. They're all actually blessings, because that wasn't the right environment for you, and it wasn't the right time. And I, actually Special Olympics, I knew that was where I was meant to be. And actually I wasn't offered the job first. They offered it to somebody else. And I was like, no, this is wrong. Like this is not right, because that I'm meant to be. So I offered that, to do some interim stuff, just followed up. And then I was made interim, and then I became permanent, and then 3 years later. So, but I would go, and for anybody looking for your career, if you don't get roles, that's okay. Just keep going. The right one, the right place will just turn up eventually. So for me, I thank God for the roles I didn't get, because I wouldn't be where I am now.
Thanks, Michelle. That's really interesting, and it's a great way to look at those things as well, isn't it? I'm very conscious of time. We've got about 4 or 5 minutes left, so I'm going to ask for a relatively snappy answer from each of you. I'm not going to do the what's your favourite chippy kind of tea, because mine will be the best, so we're not going to even go there. But what I am really interested in is, what is your proudest moment in your career so far? And whoever comes off mute first can go, or I'll pick somebody. Contemplating. Okay, Sarah, I'm coming to you.
Do you know what? They're little and small, the proudest moments. And actually, it probably always goes back to the family of sport. And I have a team who are just, my family. So I would say probably the proudest moment for me is always actually when your team comes back and says, like, you're the best manager I've had, or those sort of moments that actually you're mentoring the women of the future. Really matter to me, and actually being the only disabled person that I've met probably in terms of my own career, apart from the obvious ones like Tanya Gray Thompson, then it's really important to actually inspire other women for me, and that's probably my proudest moment, when my team come back and reflect back on that.
Wonderful, thank you. Michelle?
Come in, and again, it's around people. There's been so many really proud moments, and I take those mental pictures. But one, a young girl at the time that I met when I set up Lancashire County Cricket Club's foundation, she was kind of lost. She was working in the bar. I asked her, would she be a young ambassador? Got chatting to her, found out she was a world champion Thai kickboxer, and she really wanted to get into sport. You know where I'm going with this, Yvonne. And I said, if I set up an apprenticeship program, is that of interest to you? And she went, yeah. So she became our first apprentice, activity leader. She ended up, I mean, she took a lot of learning, because you don't teach kids in school how to act in an office. So the cricket fraternity get quite upset when she had a music blaring and her feet on the desk. I was like, that's not like office etiquette. And Natasha Sweeney Meadowcroft, she worked there for 7 years, and recently in the last few years set up her own foundation, and she's helping young women just like her. And I couldn't be prouder. And she always goes, no, it's because of you, Michelle. I'm like, no. I gave you an opportunity. You took it, you ran with it. And for me, there is no greater feeling than just giving people a little, spark, lighting a spark, and just watching them rise. So yeah, she's one of my proudest.
Wonderful. I can absolutely see it. She's an absolute dream. Mad as a box of frogs, but more passion than she knows what to do with. Wonderful. Diane?
We have 3 youth clubs. So we've got our school provision where we're going into our schools, but we have 3, one in Moss Side, one in Gorton, and one we've just recently started in Ardwick. We get an average of between 140, 150 kids coming to our Gorton Youth Club every single week, every Friday. And when I walk in, I coach at those sessions and see our young people playing, dancing, badminton, table tennis, a bit of MMA going on. I sort of have an out of body experience, because I can't believe what the team have actually achieved, that we've given young people the opportunity to come and play. And when they come back and they talk to us about the impact that we've had on their lives. So we've got 6 young people who started in the programme who are now working with us, and we've known them since they're 11, 12 years old. Nothing beats that.
I think, yeah, I can totally relate to that with some of the work that we do at Foundation 92, but it is amazing. And I'm from Gorton originally, so yeah, I always have a special place. And Tammy, over to you.
I'm struck by it is all those personal moments, isn't it, that really are the things that get you motivated, make you tick. And I would echo that, in that, that you've chatted to someone and it's changed their thinking, or I suppose more heartfelt are those. We've had athletes on our Unlock program who have come to us and said that it's changed their life, and you think that's quite something to have had a positive impact on somebody's life, and that's ultimately that's what it's all about, isn't it?
Absolutely, and a great way to close. Sadly, that is all we've got time for today. That hour has literally flown by. Massive thank you to Michelle, Tammy, Sarah and Diane. Such honest insights, so much love in the chat. People are so grateful for your honesty. It's just been fantastic. The things that have really stood out to me as sort of takeaways, I think there's a couple. One, choice. Like, everybody should have a choice, what industry they want to work in, whereabouts they want to work. And, we've all got a role and a responsibility to play in that. Inclusion from the get-go, Sarah. I love that. Like, just get it from the planning day one. Like, it should be part of what we do and the norm of how we do it. I think it's very apparent, sport is a calling for all of us, without a shadow of a doubt. The other thing for me is around this tight-knit community, the team, the network within your organisation, outside of your organisation, and a really important message to invest in you, and find people that can support you from all different walks of life, and have that sort of inner and self-belief. And I think, Michelle, just to coin what you said, and nick a quote from Sir Alex Ferguson, this whole notion that success does not happen in straight lines. Anyone that says it does is not really telling the truth, because I think even from the stories that we've shared today, we all have ups, we all have downs. The point is we keep getting back up and we learn from the things that someone might class as failure, but actually there are growth opportunities. So let us know your thoughts on social media. Make sure you tag us in any posts. The next webinar we've got is on the 9th of March. It's on breaking the bias. And we've also got 2 roundtable events next week as well to support and celebrate International Women's Day. So be sure to join on those. Places are really limited on the roundtables. So if you don't book, you've got no chance of getting in on that one. Massive thank you to you all for joining us. We really do appreciate it. We know everybody's very, very busy. Thank you for being so active in the chat. It's been fantastic. It's been brilliant to connect. Thank you for having me as your host. My first one, broke the duck. Well happy about that. And we'll look forward to seeing you again next time. Thank you so much and enjoy the rest of your week. Bye-bye.